why do some professional services organizations seem to grow almost effortlessly, while others feel like they're working harder every year for less margin? It's a new year, and for many companies, that means new revenue targets, bigger goals, and more pressure for delivery teams. Today, we're going to talk about the less obvious factors that can limit your growth, even in companies that are otherwise healthy and successful. Hello, I'm Sarah Frazier, and I'm the host of Profitability on Repeat. Today, we're discussing the 5 factors that will limit your growth and what to do about them. Joining me today is Joanne Reid, founder of the Reid Collective. Joanne, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm excited that you're here, but let me tell the audience a little bit more about you and your background. So Joanne is a strategic delivery and operations consultant with a deep experience in helping agencies and professional services teams scale. As a former delivery director and head of PMO, she has lived the challenges of agency life, from managing complex portfolios and building high-performance teams to managing workflows and aligning delivery with growth goals. At the Reid Collective, she now works directly with leaders to improve utilization, strengthen client services, and create resilient delivery systems that support sustainable growth. Or in other words, Joanne knows her stuff. So Joanne, I'm really curious. Tell us a little bit more about the Reid Collective.
Thank you. So, the Reid Collective was born tail end of last year. Prior to that, I have been a consultant within a consultancy agency, and I've been helping support agency leaders, agency founders, and teams with their growth journey. So, the Reid Collective is me, and I am helping agency leaders and founders run leaner delivery. And we are on a journey around sustainable growth.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do at the Reid Collective is we look at every level within the business. So it's not just the strategic level, we're also deep dive into the day to day. So we're looking at data, we're looking at tools, we're looking at how the agency is currently running and how we can optimize that based on all the latest technology that's out there.
That's great. And it sounds so perfect for our discussion today. It sounds like you work with a lot of different companies, team sizes, operational stages, and I know you have a wealth of perspective to offer us today. So I'm excited to dive in. But let me just ask you, as you work with all the different agencies, would you say there's a single right way to run a professional services business?
I think there's definitely not a one size fits all
Mm-hmm.
perspective. It's very much adapting the approach to where the business is currently in their growth journey, what they offer, and adapting it to what good looks like. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the businesses that I work with, they don't know what they don't know. And it is very much an education piece, a training piece, but also quite enlightening for them to actually see a better way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely not like a set way, but there is uh, an easier route. And if you know what that is, then you can kind of bypass a lot of the pain points that a lot of people are seeing within their growth journey without any sort of extra support that from someone that's experienced it before.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight. Our goal today is not to prescribe a single way, as you mentioned, because it isn't a one size fits all, but rather it's to surface the common traps that professional services organizations fall into as they try to scale,
Yeah.
and how to think differently to avoid them in this year or the coming years. As we talk about this in the background, I can hear those voices screaming, what about AI? What about AI? We should be using AI. It seems like
Yeah.
everybody's talking about it. And I know the organizations that we talk to are often thinking about how can AI increase my efficiency or improve my margins. But I think what people don't realize is that AI tends to amplify whatever operating model you already have. So
Yeah.
if your foundations aren't solid, it doesn't create leverage. It just makes noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll touch on that in our conversation today too.
Cool.
But Joanne, just to kick us off at a high level,
Yeah.
when you look across professional services teams right now, what's the most common self-inflicted growth challenge that you see?
Mhm. So I definitely think the most self-inflicted growth challenge is one that I see a lot, which is visibility.
Mm,
It being able to see where things are going wrong, how you can then deep dive into a problem within the business quite easily, and you use data to inform those decisions. So things like over servicing, things like if your projects or your accounts are profitable, how are you forecasting, how are you forecasting resources, how are you forecasting um, project timelines, things like that. I think visibility is always one of the things that it takes time to do, right? If you don't have the right tool or you're not able to see it, it takes physical time for individuals to pull that data out. And typically, as part of the growth journey, people are more focused on delivering to clients because that's the highest priority and getting revenue and sales in, but they're not investing in that layer, which is the operational part of the business.
mhm,
And typically, what I've seen in agencies is they often grow around the operational issues instead of actually fixing them. And the more people they add to it,
mm,
the more it starts to get to a point where you then have to fix fundamental things because they've just basically dealt with it whilst they are growing. And yeah, I think visibility is a really key thing. And if you can start looking at that at a smaller size, you can fix it quite easily versus you are thousands of people trying to do change management is a bit of a task in itself.
yeah, yeah. Visibility is so key and really foundational to everything that we do. But so often, I think people write off visibility as, well, it's not an actionable thing, but there are measurable impacts of
Mm.
having that comprehensive visibility. But let me ask you, do you think that most agencies and consulting firms know what's holding them back? That visibility piece is missing, or do you think they just feel the symptoms, like the lower margins, the burnout, the projects that never quite go according to plan? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think they definitely feel the symptoms. I know when I speak to founders, they come to me because they know that there's something wrong, but they don't
Mm,
know what that something is. They
okay.
hear from their team that they're busy, but when they look at, as a founder or a leader within the business, you would look at it more from a financial perspective. So you're looking at the profits, you're looking at revenue
Hmm.
that's coming in, invoicing data, things like that. But when your team are saying we're busy, and we need more people, it doesn't quite align.
Hmm.
So, you can see those surface kind of indicators.
Hmm.
Um, but the real issue does sit deeper. It's more around operations and processes and people and like for example misaligning pricing against what's actually happening in delivery. So if you're costing something cheap but your team are actually delivering and over servicing what you originally costed for, but that is actually reality. We just haven't updated our costing approach.
Hmm.
Again, there's a misalignment in the process, in the teams, in the way you're approaching that. You know, Another example would be around revenue recognition.
Okay.
Some service level businesses do pure invoicing. They don't do when the revenue is actually being recognized in terms of when the work's actually being delivered.
Okay.
So it looks great in the numbers, but it's not actually that great because people might not be doing the work in that month, and they might have capacity to do other things. So again, it becomes an operational challenge, I think,
Hmm.
which is deeper because it relates to the people and the talent and the skill sets, and also processes as well, which is part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Good feedback. Thank you. It leads into our first pitfall: trusting experience over shared operational system. That's our first pitfall that many companies seem to take pride in experience and good judgment because, of course, they've been doing this for a long time, so it makes sense. But at scale, when you start to rely on that individual judgment, it can start to work against you. So my question for you is, as you work with growing organizations, at what point does gut feel stop being a strength and start becoming a liability?
Yeah. So I've been quite fortunate in my career to work with agencies that are small, and also help them scale into larger groups.
Mm-hmm.
And also as part of my consultancy, I've been able to see, again, implement that sort of experience into their growth journey as well. So what I'm finding and what I see time and time again is that when you're much smaller and you've got a lot of experience as a founder of a business, you tend to wear a lot of hats. You tend to do a lot of things. Likewise, if you have a lot of senior people in the business and you're starting to, you've started out with a lot of experienced people, you're starting to introduce, other layers within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's when gut feel tends to, you tend to look at it in a slightly different way because you're starting to delegate more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you are a bit more detached from the day to day, and that's when having a system, better processes allows you to, yes, use your gut feel, but you also not have to be the one that physically does the work, if you see
Mm-hmm.
what I mean. So,
Sure.
you are then relying on other people to support you in your role. And that's when the gut feel tends to stop when you're, and sometimes it also gets triggered by a problem. So it might be a client has left the business because they don't want to work with you guys because they're not happy. And then it's like, okay, that was a shock to the system because that wasn't what our gut feel said. So
Mm-hmm.
let's look at the data and then they find actually we're not doing this right, or we don't have oversight over X, Y, and Z. So again, it's either triggered from a problem that is
Mm-hmm.
painful to the business, or it's because you're starting to onboard other people into the
Mm-hmm.
business. You need to delegate better.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. It comes back to, are you working in the business or are you working on the business? And I think that a natural part of growth too is, a little bit of letting go. You've controlled everything. You've built this thing, from its infancy. Now you're growing. But what about trusting the data? It's hard to, do I override my gut feeling, my experience? Do I trust the data? And then, as they try to use AI, do they trust that? Or, what do you think leaders are trusting, or what do they need to do to build that trust in more the operational systems versus themselves?
So I think there's always going to be an element of gut feel from your personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because you're going to have to make a judgment on what you're seeing, whether you think it's right, or you think it's wrong. So your most seniors have various levels of experience and their gut feel tends to be quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're having systems in place like AI or operational tool or a project management tool, whatever tool that you've got, it has to be embedded in your day-to-day processes, and there has to be some sort of cadence internally where people are held accountable for what you're seeing in that system. Because if you are, let's say you're looking at a report and there are spreadsheets floating about which say something else. If your internal process isn't, let's go to this one system and we generate one report and this is our source of truth, is then very hard to then rely on that data. And equally, if people are not updating it, you can't trust that data anyway.
Hmm.
There's got to be a process in place where it becomes part of everyone's habit and everyone's practice day to day,
Yeah.
that this is our source of truth. And there's got to be, somebody looking at it. It can't just be, there because it looks good.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So I would say that the real stress test for gut feel leadership isn't philosophy, it's growth, as you talked about. And nothing exposes that faster than resource planning or, some of the decisions you've got to make, which leads us into our second pitfall. So pitfall number 2, selling and committing to work without capacity visibility. Again, that word visibility coming up. But the fundamental challenge is always reconciling what was sold versus delivering it sustainably. And now AI is positioned as a solution to fix this, as is in the case with Forecast PSA, one of our show sponsors. With smarter forecasting, predictive utilization, automated scheduling. But that only works if your capacity data lives in one place and is reliable. Like you mentioned, if it's scattered all over, it's not going to work. So let me ask you this: how many times do you see companies selling work and perhaps they're thinking, well, we'll figure it out later? In a world where AI can relieve their pain points, why are
Yeah.
still so many companies using spreadsheets to do capacity planning?
Yeah. So I think, so to answer your first question around figuring it out later once it's sold, I see that a lot. And
Hmm.
when I was in-house as a head of delivery, that was one of our philosophies in terms of the founders. It was always better to sell work first and let's worry about the resourcing later, which was a huge headache for me in that role. But I totally see where they're coming from, right? Because obviously you need to have the revenue in place to keep people busy. Now, it is common to do that, but it's also a way in which you can create that visibility around what's coming into the business and managing expectations around that. So if
Hmm.
something comes through the business, we need to know what shape that project is, and when is it likely going to come in. And we as an agency, we're the thought leaders, we're the ones that are going to deliver the service, so we can suggest timelines and things like that. So
Hmm.
what I find is the businesses that struggle with the resourcing side of things is they don't have visibility, but they don't have a plan around how they can flex their resources when
Hmm.
a demand is needed. So, things like, do you have a black book of freelancers that you can use? The existing projects that you've got, are you over burning on those because you're over servicing it? Therefore, we need to stop that and bring in new work. That there's always challenges in that. And I think it's the way in which you can troubleshoot and problem solve what that looks like and create a bit more processes around how to deal with things that come in. And yeah, I mean, with the AI side of things, you can look at it from it can help you with forecasting risks and data around your existing projects. It can tell you, things like who's best placed for the projects that are coming in based on skill sets and all this. It can help give
Hmm.
you an overview if the data and things are correct. But then there's a human aspect to a lot of this. The AI can help you so far, but then you've got to find the people to actually physically deliver the work, and
Sure.
that might not be an AI bot, for example. It might be you going out there to find physical people to do things like a video production piece or something like that. You can't use those tools for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we're suggesting using AI to replace a
Yeah.
human to deliver the project. But do you think that overcommitment is a planning issue, a disconnect between sales and delivery? Or where do you think the breakdown occurs?
Yeah, so just to touch back on your point that you mentioned earlier around spreadsheets, a lot of spreadsheets happen all the time, and there's going to be an element of spreadsheets in a business, no matter how great the tools are. There's always going to be a spreadsheet that somebody has to use, right? Unless
Hmm.
you've built your own tool yourself, you might not have those spreadsheets, but that's a lot of investment that most people don't have. So there's gonna be when you're using spreadsheets, and if your business operates on spreadsheets, like I've got lots of clients that operate purely on spreadsheets, there's always an element of manual issues that happen, human error with formulas. It's always out of date at the point in which you take that sample. So if you
Hmm.
take timesheets, it's out of date at that point, that literally that time in which you take that timesheet, it is out of date. So there's going to be, if you're doing planning via spreadsheets, there's going to be a level of overcommitment because by the time you take that spreadsheet or you plan something, there's always other things flying around.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think when you're looking at growth and you're looking at overcommitment, I think it is part of that journey. You're always
Okay.
gonna, as part of growth, sometimes you're gonna say we can do this, but you don't actually have the talent to do it.
Right.
So yeah, you can again, you have to look at your existing work, your existing skill sets, your existing resources, and then look at what's coming in and see, do you want it? Do you need it from a finance perspective? And can you deliver it? Um, and sometimes people commit to things that they can't do in-house, which then
Mhm.
means they have to outsource it. And then they might not have costed it properly. And then, yeah, it's not worth their while, for example. But again, it's all part of that journey, that growth
Sure.
journey.
Sure. So as you talk about it being part of the growth journey, do you think some level of overcommitment is necessary to grow, or is that just kind of a myth that we tell ourselves?
Yeah, so I think like we probably tell ourselves that yes, overcommitment is part of the growth journey. And I think it is. There's overcommitment in terms of you want to generate more revenue and you want to sell more versus over servicing. So overcommitment could be translated in, are we over servicing a client or are we looking to get more sales in? And that's an overcommitment because we don't have the resources. So
Hmm.
I think, yeah, there's depending on what your role is or how you interpret it, I think, yeah, over commitment is definitely part of growth. So I don't think it's a myth. It's depending on how you interpret it.
Great, great. Okay, good answer. But I think that one thing that we can agree on is that overgrowth, or excuse me, overcommitment stretches teams. And when teams are stretched thin, another pattern starts to emerge. Process discipline starts to feel like a luxury that you can't afford right now. Maybe you're taking some shortcuts, and everyone starts solving problems their own way, which leads us to pitfall number 3, letting every team invent its own way of working. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of this. Uh, and you might argue, well, every project is different, which, yes, okay, that's true. But at scale, how much variation can an organization realistically absorb?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, it's common that every agency approaches, ones that I've been in or consulted for, have approached every project in a different way. So there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be an element of customization across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But where you've got people doing very different things, I think that's where, as a business, it is a huge red flag that you don't want individuals doing their own processes
Mm-hmm.
and managing clients and teams in a specific way that suits them,
Mm-hmm.
versus it being a process that the whole agency has as a base, and then you customize it based on the client. So you've got standards that
Mm-hmm.
you keep across those across the organization. You can't absorb a lot of that, because one of the things that you need to think about as part of your growth journey is, if that person was to leave tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
and they've managed your biggest accounts on their own processes, how are you going to onboard that client seamlessly and not impact that relationship with that client and that level of trust?
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to impact it, then that's a huge problem, because you've got to always think about the fact that that person could not be there, and what does
Mm-hmm.
that look like. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think organizations need to absorb it. I think they need to be thinking about the impact if you have all of this disjointed approaches, is how do you pull it together? And sometimes a tool set, when you're launching a tool set in-house, can bring that together quite nicely, because
Mm-hmm.
you've got to audit everything across the business and then pull it into a new tool set. And that's what I've seen a lot of organizations consolidate a lot of their processes into spreadsheets and all of that, because it's all in one place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. You know, I've always been on the creative side of things, and I think especially with creative teams, our natural reaction is no, 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 no. Process kills my creativity. Don't you dare bring that in. And just I want that innovative spirit. So
Yeah.
why do you think standardized processes get such a bad reputation, professional services, especially for the creative side? How do you overcome it?
Yeah. So I totally understand where you're coming from, because I think creatives are typically, in my experience, they're the ones that find it a bit more challenging, because it is, like you say, it might put a dampener on their innovation or their
Mm-hmm.
creative time. But I do think with processes, it is a baseline, and you have to involve all of the various teams within the organization. It's not just from leadership, it's not just from project management, it
Mm-hmm.
is from the subject matter experts that need to feed into that process. So, where you've got creatives, for example, that don't want to track time,
Mm-hmm.
which is always a big one. From a business perspective, we need to track time so we can learn where we need to cost better.
Mm-hmm.
We need to then, if we cost better, we can then give the team time, the right time to do the work. So if they are overstretched, it might be because we've not sold it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if we have sold it correctly, then they have the time. Equally, they need to be part of the a process around estimation, so they own that. So again, it's just about bringing the right people in the right times,
Mm-hmm.
and building a process whereby they've got their own standards in each skill set. So creative and design, they've got their own standard around that. And that's not something that we would build, who
Mm-hmm.
are non-specialists.
Mm-hmm.
We would get them to do that. So again, we're looking at tying in everything into what good looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and what standard is within the organization, and then building on that and evolving that as we grow and as we introduce more experienced people, maybe new roles, we adapt it and we grow with that.
Good, good. So as you talk about building in those standardized processes, when the processes aren't consistent, what breaks first? Is it delivery? Is it margins? Is it people? Is it just everything breaks down, or what happens?
Yeah, so if it's inconsistent, what happens is typically the team don't understand what's expected of them.
Mm,
Therefore, they spend a lot of time that
hmm
then eats into your margins. And then what happens is you start getting bottlenecks. If people become sick because they're overworked or overstretched, they
hmm
become sick. And if their process is specific to how they manage things, it's then very difficult for anyone else to cover them and pick it up.
mm,
Then it
yeah.
has an impact to the business because the business can't run with a reliance on one person and their processes and their knowledge. So documentation and standardized processes is really, really key. Even if you're working in isolation, you're always going to have things that you need to do. So you need to, let's say a developer, you need to update your tasks, you need to update the statuses, you need to log time, you need to then push your code up into a repository, and it has to have the right standards, naming conventions, all of that. So there's a process that you would go through that is standard. There might be some nuances to it on a project level, but the standard is always there.
Yeah, good, good. And even when organizations establish more consistent processes, that doesn't mean the problems disappear, but it does mean that they're going to become easier to spot. And the real question is how early can you spot them, which is brings us to pitfall number 4, is reacting to problems only after clients feel them. So you
Yeah.
talked about, having that consistent delivery experience, and when processes are all over the place and somebody leaves, that goes away.
Yeah.
So most, in my experience, most clients don't experience issues overnight. They quietly build. It's not whether warning systems exist, but whether organizations are paying attention to them early enough. So, what signals tend to be ignored the loudest that you see? Is it budget? Is it timeline? Is it client sentiment? Is it processes? What is it that organizations should be paying more attention to?
So I think this typically happens. I see a lot of and have experienced it myself when the organization is much smaller. Um, we tend to, so a client signs off a piece of work, and we tend to kind of go quiet around where we are progress wise on the timeline because they've not chased anything, or they've never asked for budget burn. So we're not going to give them an overview of where they are on their budget. It's the same for retainer clients. Month on month, the client is expecting us to do work and expecting us to report on hours, but because they've never asked, we're not going to give it.
Mm,
And I think that proactiveness around client management
hmm
allows you to be able to not get that shock overnight where a client says, I'm going to hand in my notice and we're going to leave you guys as an agency because we're not getting X, Y, and Z. And it does, you're right, it
hmm
does build up behind the scenes. And typically it's those clients that go quiet are the ones that you want to pay attention to, but also it's the ones that have the smallest budgets but expect the most out of organizations. They're the ones that tend to always be quite painful from an internal perspective and an external perspective. So it is again making sure that you are proactively managing that client. And the things that they want to know is where's my money going to?
hmm
And when are you going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver? And if you're not giving updates regularly, like each week, I always like to say to my team, do it the same time each week so that it's like clockwork. They
hmm
know if there's no movement on something, I know I'm going to get a report that says no movement at the end of the week because it's down to X, Y, and Z. I need feedback for this and that.
hmm
Um, so again, it's that proactiveness. Don't wait for your client to tell you that they're handing in their notice, if you're not giving them what they need, other agencies will, or other businesses will, because we're a service-based business and we're looking at giving time for an output. And if you're not managing that, it's something that other businesses in that same field will do as part of their process anyway. So yeah, it's about thinking ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that client dissatisfaction is usually a surprise, or do you think it's something that somebody just didn't want to surface?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think if a client doesn't want to surface something, it's probably because you don't have a good relationship with them.
Mm,
That's why they don't want to talk to you. So if you're going on calls and you're always asking them for more money because you've overburnt on something, they're likely not going to tell you that they're happy or not happy about other stuff that's happening in the business.
hmm hmm
So they might not give you extra work, right? Because you keep asking them for more money and you're not proactively managing them. I think also there's a side where yeah, it can be a surprise because they might have been acquired by another business. But again, if you've got a really strong relationship with the client, they will tell you what's going on behind the scenes, so you can then um, proactively manage that.
hmm
It's like normally there's a boiling point, right? So if you put water in a pan, you normally switch it on and then it starts to bubble and then it starts to boil over. That's exactly what clients are like. So it might be that they are about to tip over, but
Yeah,
you just don't know it yet, right? You're not paying attention.
right, right, right. How much damage do you think is done by the time leadership gets involved? You know, because when things start to go south, you're like, oh, let's bring in our CEO, or let's bring in our director of delivery or whatnot. But how much? I mean, can you salvage the relationship, or how much damage is done?
Yeah, so I think you can definitely salvage it. I've been on a lot of those calls in my career where we've been able to salvage it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they want somebody. The reason why we would step in is because they're not getting the answers that they need, or they're
Mm-hmm.
not seeing any change that the team has either promised them or they have outlined why they're upset, but nothing's happened. So they
Mm-hmm.
want to speak to leadership about it. At that stage, typically, you can salvage it. If you don't get a written complaint to the CEO that they want to cancel, typically you can salvage it. And possibly in that scenario, the CEO might be able to salvage it, right? Because they've got probably a good relationship with them and they
Mm-hmm.
just want someone to do something now, right? That tends to be the boiling point. So yeah, I think you can always recover it, but it's about always in those conversations, what are you going to do differently in your processes? So it might be, how are you going to go do differently if I'm overburning on my retainer and I don't know that I'm overburning each month? How are
Mm-hmm.
you going to make sure that I know when I hit my limit, go ask my CEO for more money, which is making me annoyed? So again, it boils down to reporting and proactively sharing that sort of information that they're expecting. So even having a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with them around like reports, what you're expecting to see from your leadership internally and your day to day, what are you expecting? And as an agency, you have to go there with a baseline, like what is your report that you would share with me, sorry. So yeah, I think it's definitely you can salvage it, but it's about what you're going to do next.
And I think that's so important too. As you talk about reporting, you've not only got to report to the client, where am I at? What am I getting for the money? What are you doing what you said you were going to do when you said you're going to do it? But I think from the agency side, the reporting is also key because you have to know, am I burning budget too fast? Am I going to stay on track? Or when things start to go south, and I've seen this happen a lot of what happens, you give away free hours or, you have to fix it to salvage the relationship and that eats into your profitability. So we're leading into the fifth pitfall, which is treating reporting as an afterthought. I mean, if you're doing the reporting, the signals are there, but it's whether or not you're following through and you're surfacing them early enough to act on them. But I think, though, too, that reporting has negative consequences. Like I remember in my service-based company days, we used to do monthly operating service reports, or OSRs for short. And what we affectionately called them were the oh shit reports, because we all waited till the very last minute to do them. And every department head would procrastinate, and the CEO would just relentlessly hound us to get them done. And so I don't think this situation is uncommon either. So why is reporting such a chore rather than a tool? Because like we just talked about, it's important for the client, it's important for the organization, and yet often it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen regularly, or it doesn't happen on time. So why is that?
It's a chore because it's probably hard to find the data. So it takes time to pull it together. I think that's the fundamental reason why people hate it. It's not the case. I mean, there might be some other factors like like I don't want people seeing that I'm doing X amount of time over every project. For example, it might be a personal reason why you don't want to do the reporting, because it might uncover stuff that you might not want them to see, perhaps. But typically, it's a chore. And like when I do audits for businesses around, I do delivery audits, and part of that is to look at their data. And I've seen businesses run on one sheet, might have 50 different tabs on there. And as a person, I mean, I love spreadsheets, but I don't love them that much. It is a chore to do. And so if you are doing this every day, I can see why people hate those reports. And also it's about understanding, why am I reporting on this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
who cares? Like, who cares about this? And why am I reporting? What is the reason behind it? So if you're doing, let's say, retainer report, why are you doing it? The reason is you can manage capacity, you can manage clients' budgets, you can align expectations internally and externally. And if something comes through, let's say a client wants a fixed price project in a retainer, you can say, this is the impact physically in this report of why I cannot fit that fixed price project in your retainer. So it is a conversation piece as well. So understanding the benefit and why you're doing it, but also how it supports you in your role as well. Because otherwise it does become a chore.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are pulling data from multiple areas or looking at loads and loads of tabs, it's probably because you don't have the right tool in place, and you need to find a tool, and there's always something better than a spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I love knowing the why behind the report, because I always hated preparing reports, and then you wonder, is anybody even looking at this?
Yeah.
That's the worst. But what changes when reporting becomes always on instead of end of month or end of week?
Mm. So there's a huge benefit when it's always on. The reason is that you don't have to rely on individuals to give you
Mm-hmm.
a report. So I can't give you an answer because I'm waiting for X, Y, and Z to be done, and then I have to wait for them to pull it together. So again, there's excuses around why I can't see a report.
Mm.
If it's always on, then you are able to dive into that data at any point in time and know that that data is live. So I don't have to wait for those sheets to be updated. I don't have to wait for somebody to explain something to me. I can actually look at it and go, okay, I can see where there is a resourcing issue. I don't have to wait for my meeting 2 days time to talk about it. So that always on approach allows you to make better business decisions, and it also allows you to assess if you are doing things outside of work, which typically in the agency world, we work a lot outside of work. We're allowed to still do aspects of our job outside of business hours, away from other people as well. So yeah, always on really, really helps. And you're looking at the right thing, not something that's 5 days out of date, for example.
Yeah, no, that's key. And I think we can kind of sum this up that you've got to have timely and reliable and relevant reports. Otherwise, the dreaded decision lag sets in, and it holds everything up, from maybe bidding on a new project based on how this other one is performing, or, capacity considerations or retainers or what have you. So lots tied up into reporting. Good discussion on that. We're running a little bit out of time here, so and we've covered a lot of ground. All of these pitfalls matter, but if a company could only fix one, what do you think would have the biggest impact?
So I think one of the biggest impacts would definitely be, I would say, taking into account AI, which is huge, coming from a lot of agencies that I speak to, that they're trying to look at
Yeah.
embedding them as well. I would definitely say is around the visibility of data that you've got at the moment. So looking at the way in which how are you tracking all of the data around your day to day? Are you looking at it in one system? And is it manual? Is it not talking to one another? Ideally, we want to be able to set a source of truth, and that will allow you to then be AI ready
Mm-hmm.
when you are looking at maybe building your own internal LLM, which we did in my previous consultancy
Mm-hmm.
agency that I was in. So again, that would be the one thing to look at. So looking at your data and looking at your visibility would then allow you to unpick the other problems that you've got, like processes, like your reporting. All of that stuff will fall into the visibility part, and typically it will be a starting point to then look at how you're going to implement a system, how you're going to start automating, how are you going to start tying those systems for a 360 view of
Mm-hmm.
your agency or of your business, and not having these siloed teams and siloed systems. You can still have those siloed systems like finance, for example, and CRMs, but it's about pulling that in together to a source of truth where you can make better real-time business decisions.
Yeah, that's great. We started this discussion talking about the importance of visibility. I think it's so important, or so appropriate, that we're ending the conversation with, again, circling back to how important visibility really is. And I think as organizations try to layer on AI, as you've mentioned, you don't have visibility if you don't have a good foundation where your data is consistent, it lives in one place versus disconnected systems. AI is not going to work. You're just going to get accurate results faster. At Acello, these are exactly the challenges we spend time thinking about, and how our professional services platform can bring clarity to planning and delivery while executing profitably, even as organizations scale. If today's conversation about delivering and resolving these internal bottlenecks, whether it be inefficient growth handoffs, siloed data, lack of visibility, reactive scheduling, or even leveraging AI in your delivery operations. If any of these topics have resonated with you, we encourage you to take the next step. Don't have to tackle these challenges alone. We invite you to book time with the Acello team. This isn't a high pressure sales meeting. It's an opportunity to discuss your company's specific situation, current challenges, and unique growth objectives. Our analysts can analyze your existing processes, from client management, service delivery, billing, and resource allocation, and provide a clear roadmap of how a unified platform like Acello or Forecast PSA can help you optimize your entire operational workflow and unlock greater profitability and sustainable scaling. You can schedule your consultation at acello.com. Additionally, if you want to reach out to Joanne, it's Joanne Reid on LinkedIn or the reidcollective.com to find her website. Otherwise, we are all out of time. Joanne, thank you for joining me today, and thank you to our listeners. And until next time, may every project perform like your best one.